got to do now. Welcome, everyone. That is helpful. Welcome to Adventures in Networking. Kelly, I stole your thunder there.
Oh, no, I don't know what to say now. Welcome to Adventures in Networking would probably be wise. My name's Kelly West and I'm here with James West. We're the founders of Only Networking, the business network for people who like people.
Absolutely. So topic today, we've got a couple of things to cover. Getting sales at networking. Are you referable? Said that like an old press man. We're going to discuss that topic. Networking repair shop we're going to look at. It's a great question, actually. How long should you stay in a networking group before moving on? We've got two fantastic guests. We've got Paul Hill, Phil Coley. You're going to learn a lot from those two guys, particularly around that selling through networking. So look forward to having them on. Kelly.
Well, just to say that if you'd like to appear on the show, leave a comment and we'll share it with the audience. We'll discuss whatever it is you say, of course, within reason, depends on what you comment. And if you've got a question for the networking repair shop, please also leave that in the chat box and we will make sure to answer it. If we can't do it live today, then we will make sure to address it on another episode.
For sure. So this question then, how do you get sales at networking? Because we all kind of go into it, don't we? Like, oh, we all know it. Why do we think we know how to do it? And in fact, I'm going to start there. I'm going to go first on this before we ask Kelly and our guests. But when I first went networking, and I think it's really important to say this is someone who runs a network, loves networking, has got lots from it, because I think you'll then maybe perceive that, well, these guys knew how to do it out of the box. We didn't. And in fact, when I first went networking, I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to sell, firstly. I didn't know actually what I was selling. So whatever I was saying was kind of falling on deaf ears. So I think that's really important. If you're going networking, you just keep saying stuff and you haven't really got a defined message. We'll come on to that more later. But I wouldn't keep doing it, hoping that eventually it's going to give you a result. Definitely didn't work for me. I evolved what I did at networking based on that clueless assumption. It was a comfort zone thing for me that as an ex-journalist, I was good at asking questions. I was interested in people, and that's all I did. So I stopped trying to sell what I was doing. I just went to networking. Every time I got a chance to speak to someone, tell me about you, tell me about your business, tell me about your challenges. That was it. And that's a great way to break the ice, get into conversations. And funnily enough, people then kind of self-sorted what they needed me for. They actually started revealing, well, I've got this problem with my marketing or my messaging. Oh, right, okay, I might be able to help with that. So, but I think it's really important to reiterate the point. Don't just keep saying stuff expecting to get a result. Ask questions is a good starting point. What about you, Kelly? How did you get on when you first went networking?
Well, my story kind of starts prior to that. So I came from travel industry. I worked in the travel industry for 10 years and I was shop floor, high street, travel agent, customer facing role. It was great. I loved holidays. Who doesn't want to talk about holidays? But I didn't enjoy the sales process. I didn't like that we were told within 15 seconds of someone coming in the door, you have to say this, you have to memorize it, you have to say it. Depending on if they answer this, you say this. If they say that, you do that. You then get the form out and you go, no. And I wouldn't do it, much to my manager's annoyance. But he couldn't do anything about it because I was the top seller in the store. I worked 2 days a week and I outsold the full-timers. And it did frustrate him because I just wouldn't follow that sales pitch. I just wouldn't do it. And I said, when I'm not the top seller, then you can tell me I have to do it. Because for me, it was about, it didn't sit comfortably with me. So I couldn't in all honesty say that was something I could do for people because that interaction didn't feel natural. So what did I do? I let people come in the store, would smile, I'd be nice, I'd acknowledge them and I'd make them feel good, give them room to breathe. And then I'd go and I'd talk to them at what I felt was an appropriate time to further that conversation. When I stopped the high street job, I went up to head office and that was a little bit different. But then I had my own travel business as a travel counsellor. So I had to go networking. And that was my first experience of networking. But two things there. I brought the mentality of the shop floor into my own business, the discounting, it was my money then. And that was a problem. But I still brought a lot of that sort of drummed in stuff along with me. But I didn't sell it at anyone because, well, if you want that thing I'm providing you, and I'm nice to you, and I talk to you, and I take interest in you, you're going to come back to me when you want that holiday and that nice thing. Now, don't get me wrong. Holidays are a little bit of an anomaly, aren't they? Everybody wants a nice holiday. So to have a contact in that space is quite an easy sell, let's say. But the principle's the same. I don't need to hammer home all the time what I sell. I need to get to know you. And actually, thinking about that in context, holidays would soon become a chore if, as a travel representative, all I did was hammer home to you what deal I've got. New York on this is holidays would soon not be very much fun if I just kept bombarding you with that message. So it's about understanding the person, finding out the emotions behind them, and because that's really where sales are driven from, the emotional side, aren't they?
I think we've met a few people recently, haven't we, that have fallen into that trap. Right, I need to get to know you to spot a sales opportunity. And like you're saying, if every time you're having those conversations, it's because you're trying to engineer back to a point where you can say, oh, I've got something to sell you. That becomes tiring very quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Simon Gregg, absolutely, Simon. No one likes a pushy salesperson. We don't. There's certain environments where we expect it, I guess. I don't know. Let's be really umbrella here. Going to buy a car. You expect that the car salesman's going to be a bit pushy, and you're probably going to have a little bit of fun with it, or you're going to hate it. It doesn't really matter, but you expect it in that environment. That doesn't mean that's a good thing. And, I would argue that if you can buck that trend and be a different seller in that space, then you're probably going to reap the rewards as being standing out in that space as not being stereotypical. So it'd be interesting to see what Phil has to say about this when he comes on.
Definitely.
Good morning to you.
Hi, Brian. Good morning.
Oh, afternoon.
It's been a long week, isn't it? It's been a long week. To see you, Brian. I don't know where Paul's gone, but I think it's probably about time that we bring a sales expert into the mix.
We do that.
Let's bring Phil on. How you doing, Phil?
I'm all right. Who's the sales expert? Have you got somebody coming on here, hopefully?
Yeah, he's lined up in the background. So good to have you on the show, Phil.
Really nice to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Do you want to do a quick 10-second, 20-second intro of yourself, please?
Phil Coley, sales coach, been in the world of sales, both direct sales, internal, external, field sales, contact centers for about the last 35 years. So been around the block a little bit, run my own business as well. Currently we're in our 12th year. So yeah, I'd like to think I know a few things about sales. And as I say, my background is through and through sales.
And Phil, if you don't know Phil, he lives in France now, so he's having to learn how to sell in French. That must be quite interesting. We've got a bit of a lag on this.
I was with a French client this morning who speaks.
Yeah, you're a bit lagging, I think, Phil. We'll just have to give ourselves a little bit of a pause in between the questions. So, Phil, this is the question we're answering. Selling at networking. What's your journey? How did you learn how to sell at networking? Did you bring in previous sales experience or did you adapt it? How did you learn to sell at networking?
So my networking journey began in the late 90s. So certainly I have used networking a lot to build my business. And my approach, although I'm a sales coach, is not utilizing networking to selling. That's never been my approach with networking. My approach has been people do buy from people and building relationships. So for me in the world of networking, I've always built relationships and I've always gone to see how I can help somebody out first, regardless if they're ever going to be a client or not. And I think that's what I talk to a lot of people about is whenever you go networking, don't look at someone and go, oh, they're not going to be a client, so I'm not going to talk to them, because you don't know who their network is. And I learned that really early on. And I built 3 businesses on the back of networking in different ways. So that's always been my approach, is just don't sell.
But it does lead to sales, doesn't it? And I think because it can sound a little bit like, well, you don't sell, therefore you're not going to sell. But So what's the approach that, and we're going to bring Paul in a minute to get his opinion, but what is the approach of not selling at networking that ends up getting you to be able to sell and build a business through networking?
For me, I can only speak from my own opinion and my own experience, that if you build the right relationships and you take an interest in the person you are talking to and you build the relationship with them and you help them where you can, and they understand about your business, and you do have to tell them what you do, and you go through that, then they will either go, let's see how I can help you, or they might go, I think I need to talk to you about what you do, because it might be of interest to me. So it's never about that pushy sell, but you do need to make sure that people understand what you do. And I think for me in networking, be that, in the world of online now, and of course only you really were at the bleeding edge, not the leading edge of it, because you went online before, the dreaded C word. So, you get it. But for me, be it online or face to face, just be memorable and just be you. And I know when within my agency, the first thing I ever did was we used video as the thing to get in, and people, because it was 12 years ago, everyone wanted to get into video. I just had a clapperboard and I used that in a face-to-face networking because it got people's attention and they just knew me for that. So be known for what you do. Don't overly sell it. Get to know people and give as much as you can, but always be memorable for what you do.
Love that.
Can I just make a point there as well, James? Because I think what Phil's talking about leads quite nicely into this. When we're talking to people, and particularly if you're new to networking, I think there is this thought that I've got to get as many referrals as I can, right? And that's all you think about referrals. I mean, we're a relationship first network, not a referral first network, because we believe it comes after building that connection. But what I can give you in abundance is introductions. Okay, but I can only give you introductions when I get to know you. So I just wanted to highlight what the difference of this is. And actually, maybe if you tweak your thoughts around your behavior at networking, you will see over time much more success. Don't go to get referrals, go to get introductions. Okay, because those introductions I could give even somebody I've never met before, and I do this very frequently, 5 or 6 introductions. And what I tend to do is give 1 or 2. And as the relationship continues, I'll give more, because you just can't keep giving all the time, can you? But my point here is that introduction doesn't need to be a sniff of work or a guarantee of a sale. It's an introduction to widen your network. Okay. And that's what networking is for. When you then speak to those introductions, you might find 1 in 10 of them become a customer. Fantastic. Happy days. Depends what you do. But my role as an introducer is to widen your network, not just to put money in your back pocket. And I think that's what people miss when they go networking. You need to look at the introductions, you need to foster those relationships, and you need to further them. And sometimes they'll become referrals. And that's the way I look at it.
Definitely. I think there's 2 conditions that are going to lead you to getting sales at networking. The first one, and it's quite simple, the first one is behavior. The second one is around messaging. So behavior, by the way, you have to do it in that order, because if you get the behavior wrong, the messaging won't work. Okay. So basically, because if you think about it, networking is about word of mouth referral marketing. That's effectively what we're doing in a sales perspective. So are people going to want to help you first and foremost? Because if they're not, you're probably not going to get very far. Are you likable? So you could sell a product that is applicable to the people that you network with and their immediate contacts. That's an easier sale. Or you're trying to reach the connections of the connections, or both. Depends on the size of business that you're aiming. Irrespective of which one it is that you are trying to sell to, you've got to be liked, and you've got to be seen as being a person who wants to help others. So very quickly, once you realize that, you'll see why flitting around networks and just visiting different networks doesn't work, because you haven't built any credit. You also haven't built any reputation. I talk about this a lot because people say, well, I don't have a product that I can sell to a networking audience. can you maybe adapt something that you could sell, maybe a workshop or a taster of what you do? Because even if it doesn't make you a lot of money, it can be a great way to kind of validate what you do and build reputation. I went to Phil's sales workshop and I learned some really good stuff. So I would now refer Phil on to a larger contact of mine. So step one's that behavior. Have you earned credit with the network? Are you likable? Are people going to want to help to you? And then the second point is, do people understand what you do and what value that you can give? So that's step two, the messaging. If you can't succinctly explain what you do, who's it for, what value you deliver, and roughly what it costs, don't expect me to be able to sell on your behalf, because I can't. Because this is another one, Kelly, we hear quite a lot, doesn't it? Well, I'd need to have a conversation with you before I can tell you what I sell. Okay, great, because you might be, everything that you do is bespoke, but then don't expect me to give you a referral or ever get a referral if it's a prerequisite of you selling is to be able to get in front of anyone. Because I don't know, how can I ever sell you on? So it's kind of selling that story. How does that resonate with you, Phil?
I think the word you said there, James, which most people miss, is the message. And it's the message as much as when you've got your 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever you've got to introduce yourself. I just hear so many people do a product dump. I do da 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 da. And it's like, so what? It's about benefits. If you're going to sell a pillow, people want to know that a pillow is relaxing. It'll help you have a decent night's sleep. That's a really good benefit. They don't care what's inside it. They don't care it's made of this. It's just, am I going to get a good night's sleep and it's comfortable? So many people just say what they do. They never look at the benefits of who it's for. And you can easily do that in your 60 seconds. You just can. And that's where I think the messaging goes wrong as well. And just the final thing on this one piece, James, as well, is I think if you can, give people a taster, a try before you buy type thing or anything like that, it will engage with people, let them see what you are like. And just because the world of networking is just like dating. It's just, you have to go through various stages before you go down the aisle with someone. You really do. And I think so many people forget that at networking. They come waltzing in, we're going to get married by the end of the conversation. It's like, that's never going to happen. And if you remember that, just about building relationships softly, it works.
It's that combination, isn't it? Good. We had a couple of people on the meeting this morning. We did only Brighton, and there were two visitors, and Joe talked about social media specifically for trades, because trades just want it as a done for them service. They can see the benefits. They don't have the time or the expertise. So introduce me to trades. I can solve a problem for the trades. And then the other chap, and I forget his name, he was the video for coaches. And he said, I'll come to your office, I'll create the content for you, and I'll help you work out how to use it on social media. So and it will solve a problem by getting your message in front of the right audience. So these were really specific, some of the better messaging I'd heard for a while. Kelly, it's really important though that they get and I'm not saying they won't do this or haven't do this, because they can't, because they're visitors, but the behavior bit, like Phil saying, the messaging is really important, but just talk a little bit more about the behavior bit, because it's the key to get you into the messaging working, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're great examples, both great guys that came along today. I think they were both recommended in by existing members. So straight away, they're a bit of a warm lead already, because they've been introduced in by people that we really respect as a community. But paid attention, wasn't over there doing something while other people were talking. They were really actively involved in conversation. They were speaking about other people that had referenced things. So, they really were showing that they were in the space. So I think over time, if they come back and visit again, or if they join, they're just reinforcing that they want to be part of the bigger picture and they want to be part of that community. So of course, they've done two things there. They've gained the credit, and they've also been really good at their messaging and told us what their true product is. And this is what Brian talks about, doesn't he? So what's your true product? What do you actually sell? And he talks about this. He says Home Depot, but we'll use B&Q. B&Q don't sell you a hole in the wall, or the drill bit to put a hole in a wall. they sell you the picture on the wall that you want to put up. They sell you that vision of, I've got this wonderful picture and I want it put up over there. That's what you're buying. You go to the store to get the bits and pieces to give you that vision. Yeah. And that's your true product. What are you actually selling to your potential customers?
The bit about messaging, you know, there's a million people that do what you do, by the way. Like, there are so few business categories out there. They're all derivatives of a very small number of business functions. So social media coaching, HR, whatever it might be. Two ways to differentiate. You've got to find some kind of segmentation, some kind of uniqueness in what you do. And you can definitely do that through good messaging. The other way to do it is just by you being you and being a liked person. Because like Simon Gregg's point, you know, you could have the best message in the world, but if you're not a likable person who listens and cares about other people, don't care how good the message is, you are not going to get introduced. Because I'm thinking, I'm going to create an awkward conversation for the person that I introduce. So it's immutable, isn't it? If you want to sell at networking, you've got to get both of those things.
That point from Simon is absolutely spot on as well. And I've been known to introduce, more often than not, my introductions are just because I think two people are going to get on. That doesn't often factor in anything more than that. Then you really need to speak to that person. You need them in your network because you want to grow it. But Simon's a really good example. So he's part of Fusion. So is Chris Mansfield. So is Lisa Richardson. And quite often, two of them will be in the room together. They're doing the same business. They're all three of them professional networkers representing the same business. But the key there is, I might warm to Chris over Simon or Lisa over the two of them. Do you see what I mean? If I'm a women's only coach, I'm going to go to Lisa. I'm not even going to probably think about how Chris or Simon could help me. So it's about exactly that. Who do you gel with in order to take that conversation further?
Definitely. Phil, sales versus marketing, because this is something that people confuse, isn't it? Have you got anything you'd like to add on the clarification of that?
Yeah, I do. And I think for me, if you look at it, you know, from a proper point of view, networking is marketing. It's not sales. And it's great to talk about sales, but your marketing is networking. So by going to a networking meeting, you're marketing yourself. And I always remember very early on in my career that if marketing was done really well, you don't need salespeople. And that's where, when you look at networking should always be part of your marketing mix. You will meet people, you will refer to people, and then the sales process might start. And if you always remember that networking is actually part of your marketing, then you won't start to sell if you're marketing. And so that's where I want to come in on that one, particularly with networking, is it is part of the marketing mix. It's not a selling function, it's a marketing function.
Love that. You're on mute, James.
Probably changes the way you talk as well, doesn't it? If you're thinking as a marketing exercise rather than a sales exercise. That's a fantastic point, Phil. And before we move on to the networking repair shop, I don't know where Paul is, Kelly. I think his internet's
I think he's, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just a couple of comments in there. Simon says he's nicer than the other two. There you go. So if you like a cheeky chappy, you're going to go to Simon over Chris and Lisa. You know, there you go. But there's personality there. And yeah, Brian's saying everybody's been introduced to so far, he's got my house on fire. I'm not sure if that's being sarcastic or whether he's being truthful. Hopefully he's being truthful. He's put a laughy face on there. Lee is agreeing with Phil as well by the look of it. Marketing is about visibility, and nowhere makes you more visible than networking. People forget that, though. That's a whole nother topic, but people forget that they're on camera and they're there representing themselves and their personal brand. But absolutely, Lee, spot on with that comment. Yeah,
just
I think we'll
quick point on that marketing as well. I think people think marketing at networking, great point, Phil, great point, Lee. It only applies when they're speaking. So I think people think, right, I've got to do this really sparkling pitch. What you're doing when you're not speaking is as big of a brand building marketing exercise as what you're doing when you are speaking. So the people that are disengaged, particularly online, that are over here maybe doing something else, clearly not listening to other people, and then they light up when it's their chance to speak, you're creating a negative reputation, giving a negative impression of yourself. So that's bad marketing. If you can't engage for the duration of the meeting or the point when you're talking to people, you're going to get yourself, you're painting a negative picture. So there's a little bit of a battle going on here in the chat. This won't mean anything from people outside of Only, but Chris Mansfield versus Simon Gregg, which team are you on?
Yeah, let's not start that. They're both awesome, but there we go. We'll see what happens. Absolutely. And Lee Lamb says she's nodding furiously. Hashtag nodding furiously. So good stuff. Yeah,
Let's
I think
move on, Kelly.
Paul's probably not coming. I think his internet is completely not with us, so we'll get him on another time.
That's absolutely fine. Go on. What are you going to say, Kelly?
Well, I was going to ask Phil, have you got a networking memory, Phil? Good, bad, or indifferent? What's your first memory that you can share with us?
I can pretty much remember my first 60 seconds. I can remember that. Having not done it before and got roped along to this thing called networking with one of those well-known networking groups that have been around for a long time.
You can say BNI, it's not Voldemort, and things don't explode if you say BNI, okay?
Okay, so yeah, because it's the late 90s, there wasn't much around. So I did go to this thing called BNI, and I just nearly died on my first 60 seconds, which somebody for me who's a shy, retiring, shrinking violet was an interesting thing. But by the time I got to the second meeting, because in those late 90s, I had a outsourced call center doing telesales. So the second time I went with a phone, an old-fashioned phone I took with me, and my 60 seconds was fab. Just because you put a bit of thinking into it about marketing, take a prop along sometimes. You know, it's quite good to show from that point. I'm just wondering, James and Kelly, am I allowed just to make another point? I think I've probably got something I could just sort of share, which might just be interesting. So you said at the beginning about me being in France, which I am. And within my business, I've got clients internationally, but I've still got an agency back in the UK. But equally, I am building a business here in France, building a couple of businesses here in France. And I think this is really applicable to networking about what you do. So there's not that much networking in France. There are some BNIs in France, but literally there's probably 15 to 20. But there's not much about here. So for me, it's like, how do I start a business that's not just expats that are French and help me with my French? So I joined the equivalent of the local chamber of commerce, having to do everything in French, and introduce myself to French professionals, very similar to anything else that I do in the UK. So accountants and graphic designers, and no different. It's just no different, but culturally. So I couldn't come here and I couldn't go to a chamber of commerce meeting and sell. Just couldn't, culturally I couldn't, but equally that wouldn't be the right move. It's like, who is this guy? So I've had to really market myself in terms of what I do and then go that extra mile. So, obviously I've been here a while now, and I'm now a director on the local chamber of commerce and things, but I wouldn't have got there if I'd have started selling to people. They'd be like, who are you? So I think that's a really good example of going to a new country, let alone go to a new group, go to a new country. You have to be even more aware that you're not selling, and you've got to give a bit. So I've had to give some of my expertise, not give it away. I've invested my expertise for no return from a monetary point of view to show what I can do. And that's, so I think that's a really good practical example of having to do it again. So that's me having to sort of do it again, but really be so super sure of each thing I do at each stage, and that it's from a marketing perspective. So I thought that would just be quite good for the audience, just to bring that one in.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I think I was going to ask you what tips would you give, but you've done it, you've said it there. And I think not only did you go and you speak to those people, you've had to deliver it in French as well. So that's awesome. So you've had to put a lot of effort into that space. And I think exactly what you're saying is right. You can't just turn up anywhere and expect that those people that have got an established community to welcome you in with open arms without you showing interest and wanting to play ball in that space. So there's a really good point. Thank you, Phil.
Love that. I think that's actually a great point to move on, because that's a really good kind of sign off on that. Networking repair shop. So we had a question posed via LinkedIn. Nicola Dickinson, she was at the FSB event that we were at yesterday, actually. But this question came in before that. Great question. How long do you stay in a network before deciding to move on, if you move on at all? How long do you stay in a networking group? I love this question because it kind of leads to a ton of other questions, doesn't it? Kelly, you've got some thoughts about this, haven't you? Do you want to go first?
I'm massively mindful that we run a networking group. That's our business. So you would expect me to say, well, never leave a network. Don't want any of our members to leave. My tongue-in-cheek answer is don't, for that very reason. I run a network. But my real answer there is, if it's working for you, why would you want to leave? And again, I think this is the mentality that a lot of people go into it. They'll say, oh, I give it 3 or 6 months and then I'll be off. So they've already told themselves in 3 or 6 months they're going to leave. Then they're not going to put enough effort in to give that longevity. I liken this to a couple of conversations I've had with people over the years, not just at Only, but at other networking groups I've been part of. Well, I'm going to leave now because I've made lots of really good relationships, and I'll keep those connections and I'll keep those friendships and that pipeline, and I don't need the network anymore to facilitate that for me. The sad truth is you do. You may find that, the longer you've been at a network, the more friends you do make, and the chances of you keeping those connections are definitely there. I still speak to a couple of people I was at BNI with 20 odd years ago. But that's a very small amount of people from the community that I was involved in. Okay, and that's partly my fault, partly theirs. My point here is to say that will dwindle massively over time. So there's 2 things here. One, I'll keep the relationships and I'll stay in those spaces. I don't need the network to facilitate it. And 2 is I'm really busy, so I'm going to leave the network. Both of those things change, and when they change, you've let go of all that hard work that you've put in over that time that you were part of the community. There's a lot of people that return to communities because of that reason. They've got less busy and they need to go back out. They've got to start from scratch again. So they might have familiar faces, but they are familiar faces of people that have stayed in that community, supported each other over that time. You've then got to rebuild all of those connections that you had back then. It's a real common thing that people leave networking when they're busy. Just be less active. Just keep your toe in. That's all you've got to do, is just show your face, keep your awareness, keep it ticking. And then when you're not as busy, you can get more involved. So I know I'm talking a lot here, but it's also a little bit like your friendships. So think about your closest friends. If you didn't put effort in, send them messages, go and see them now and again, or be at events with them, you wouldn't maintain those friendships. You wouldn't. They would dwindle over time. And it's exactly the same in the networking world. You will probably have lots of friends, lots of acquaintances in that space, but you need the continuity of the community and of the network to put that on for you and almost make you attend those events to see those people, because otherwise it does slide off. So that's my 2 pence. I've got more, but I think I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I think I read between the lines on this question, and this might not be Nicola because I don't know Nicola that well, but I suspect this is a lot of people. I think the question is, how long should I give it at a networking group before getting a result, or before I can expect to get a result? I think that's what the question probably is more leaning towards. And I think the answer to that is, what did you go there for in the first place? And we'll come on to sales, because I suspect for most people at some point it's because I want to get into a point where I can sell something. But it's not always that. So I want to start on the fact that, my answer to that question, when should I leave? Do you enjoy it? So do you enjoy it as in, does it give you friendship? Does it give you support? Do you learn from it? Do you like being with other business owners? Does it stop you feeling lonely as a solo business owner? I'm saying this from experience. This was definitely me. I loved going to my networking group because it was the one time I was around people that understood my trials and tribulations trying to run a business on my own, when my family, the people that I was with on a daily basis, didn't understand. That's why I love networking. And if I picked up some work that was a bonus. So, how long should I stay? If you're enjoying it and you're learning and it makes you feel comfortable, then don't. But if the question is, how long should I give it before making a sale? I think that's a slightly different question. I'm going to bring Phil in at that point. What's your take on that? How long should you stay in a network before you can expect to make a sale? Because I think that's what the real question is.
Yeah, and I think I talk about this a lot. You very rarely will you buy from somebody in the first month. It just doesn't happen because, again, you'll come in, as Kelly said, you'll come into someone's community, and you might get a lucky sale just because somebody was looking at that time and there's nobody else about that. But that's super rare. So for me, I normally see a network starts to work between 6 and 9 months. That's where you start to see something. And before COVID and before me moving out to France, I was in a face-to-face network in Gloucestershire, still in contact with a few of the guys there. And in my first 2 months, did 1,500 quid, and then didn't do anything till about month 9. So again, I was just in that lucky bit. And so for that year, that first year, did about 2,500 out of that network. And that network cost me, not a huge amount of money. It's probably comparative to Only. But then in the second year, third year, fourth, I was in it for 6 years. I was doing between 30 and 40K a year from that network. So it just works. But I think the key with anything to look at with this is, as you say, James, think about why you're in that network. What are you doing it for? And as you build, just understand the more effort you put in to build those relationships, the more referrals come to you, and then it's up to you to sell. And I think that just why I touch on that is probably one of the biggest things. When you're in that network, people will do you the referrals. They're still not selling for you. They're just doing an introduction. You have to do the next bit. And that's where people suddenly go, oh, I don't get many referrals. Oh, the referrals I get are not very good. It's like, hang on, you were given the introduction. You've got to do the selling. So that, again, is something to bear in mind.
I think that's such a good point, isn't it? And it also depends on what you're selling. If you've got a product, if you go into networking and say, I'm a copywriter, I can help you write a really good networking introduction, and it costs, I don't know, I've got a workshop and it will cost you 100 quid, or I'll do it for you for 300 quid. That's a really easy sell or potentially an easy sale, because it's a product for the people in the room plugging into the thing that they're doing right now. If, for example, you're going to networking and you'll say, I'm a leadership coach, I want to break into HR, I want to speak to the HR person for businesses with 100 employees, that's a much slower burn, isn't it? And that's where you've really got to build that trust with the people before you can expect to get that introduction. I think it's also really important to realize, what I'll often say to people is, oh, I'm not selling at networking. Okay, where are you selling? Often when you ask that question, people say, well, I'm not really. So then that begs the question, is the problem what you're selling isn't maybe positioned correctly, or your sales approach is wrong? Phil, you probably get this all the time. Do you actually have a sales process? Have you got a CRM? Have you got a pipeline? Have you got a follow-up process? Or are you just kind of rocking up, posting on social media, going to networking, saying what you do and thinking you're going to get a result? It doesn't work that way, does it, Phil?
No, not at all. You need a process. And to pick up on Kelly's point and then take it through on that process one, is you've still got to be current in your networking. So if you are super busy and there's things going on, you've still got to be turning up. You've still got to be current, because that shows you're invested. You're invested in yourself, you're invested in the network, and you're invested in the people around you. And that's what's super important. On my own personal journey at the moment, I am quiet over the last 3 months. Not because I'm not busy, I'm super busy. So I am quiet on networking. I'm not reaching out for meeting after meeting because I don't have the time at the moment, but I'm still current. I still turn up, I still talk to people, and I still go from there. But in terms of just getting the process in place is, when you go networking, you need to make sure you have one-to-ones with everyone in the groups. You know what they do eventually. That's part of your process. And never stick people on a CRM and go, they are going to do this for me in the early stages. It just doesn't work that way. Once you build the relationship, then I say to people networking, you need to think about prospects, people who will buy from you. You need to think about referrers who will never ever buy from you, but they will refer people to you, and then also signposters. So James, you and Kelly were at an event yesterday with the FSB. The FSB are really good at signposting. They will signpost their members to this person or that person through their website is one of the areas. So just when you do start to have a process and build, just look and get to understand people. You know, I've got a couple of referrers who have never ever bought from me, but they have given me a huge amount of business, and I've never sold to them. I haven't had to because they're referrers. So also think about that in your process, and then how you stay in touch with people. I mean, we could talk about the whole sales process forever, so I won't continue on that one, but just, you know, just have a process in place, but also just start to, as you build relationships, understand how you can help someone and how they can help you.
I think there's this misconception around volume, and I'm going to come to you, Kelly, because you've got a really good example of this idea that, oh, you hear people go, well, I've been at that network a while. I know all the people there, therefore I've exhausted all of my networking avenues. I need to go to another network. And that's quite two-dimensional, isn't it? Because you're not thinking about the connections of the connections. Kelly, just kind of, you can underline this by talking about your BNI experience, because the size of that group and the volume of business that you got is very eye-opening and helps answer this question.
Yeah, I was in a BNI, I can't remember what they call it now, pre-launch group, whatever it was. You have to get to a certain number, don't you, before they launch. Oh, God, I think we were in that group for about 18 months with 8 people, same 8 people. And every week they'd still say the same spiel, even though we didn't have visitors there. And I used to think, oh, my goodness. But I got 74% of my business from that group of 7 other people. So, you know, I could have very easily gone, well, what's the point of me getting up at 6:30 and going to that and doing that? And I'll tell you why, because I wouldn't have made the commitment to keep in touch with them and to make the effort to go and be part of their sphere, to go to a barbecue if somebody was holding it, or to be engaged in their content on social media, because it wouldn't have held me accountable. It wouldn't have done. Now, again, like I say, I don't talk to most of them, probably speak to one of them still. And if I saw the others, of course, I'd be very happy to have a conversation. But that continuity of seeing them makes such a big difference. It really does. And I think it's probably important to add here, you can be a member of multiple networks. You don't have to pick one and stick to it. You have to pick the ones that you can manage, okay? And ones probably that complement each other. And Richard Hyron said, oh my, sounds like that awkward breaking into a face-to-face conversation even further. But I think gone are the days that we need to say, what do you prefer, in person or online? I don't ever want to have that argument again. You'll prefer one over the other. You absolutely will. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you're switched on, you will recognize that you can do both, and both will give you different experiences and different opportunities that the other one can't give you. So use them to your advantage. And if you can juggle 2, I'd say 3 probably maximum. Depends what you do. Simon, Chris and Lisa, they can do lots. They do hundreds because it's their business. But for the typical solopreneur, business owner, business representative, you're probably looking at 3 maximum networks that you can do as a member, paid for, that you keep the consistency up, and then probably others that you dip into sporadically for the odd lunch or whatever it is you do.
Have you got a view on that, Phil? Sorry, Kelly.
Well, no, I was going to say, to put into Simon's point, you get busy because you network well. So definitely do it while you're networking, and do what Phil says. Just keep a low profile. Don't book in loads of one-to-ones, because you don't need to add more pressure. You just need to keep the consistency.
Go on, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, James, yeah, you just asked, it was interesting. As Kelly was saying that, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what point I wanted to make. You definitely shouldn't be in many, because you can't be consistent and you can't be true to those around you. And I think that's what's really important in networking. But I do think today, more than ever, you can probably be in 1 or 2 groups, maybe 3, as Kelly said. But for me, I'm in a couple of groups, and that works for me, because 1, you can't manage the time, and 2, if you're doing referrals, you don't want to get yourself into a point where you're going to give, well, who should I give a referral to you. It's about building trust in the relationship. So if you are consistent and you're in one group and you're solidly in that group, you will find you build your business better than being in multiple groups.
Definitely. And Emily, I've just flashed up Emily's comment, sort of agreeing with that. I think, just in summary, that the network is not going to save you or bail you out if you don't know how to network correctly, right? Let's flip that on its head. I think if you go to networking, any network, with the right behaviors of wanting to help, of wanting to listen to people, you've got a good message, you know what you're asking for, where you're trying to get to. I reckon you can do that at pretty much any network, irrespective of the numbers there. As long as they're decent, decent people, I think you can get a result anywhere. So I think we just want to get away from this tendency of thinking, oh, I need to move networks or I need another network. I think at some point you have to learn how to network. And that is the thing that ultimately is going to serve you, because good networkers can network in pretty much any environment. And also you can then network online via LinkedIn, because it's more about the behavior, how you talk to people, etc. So that's a really good point. Kelly, I will come to you just to wrap up, but that's why we run How to Network Online. It's our free online workshop, and it's next Wednesday. So if you're watching and you want to come along, myself and Kelly run that 1st of May, 1 till 2. I'll put the link in the chat. Please book on, come and meet us and come and learn how to network. Kelly?
Not at all. One thought there, I just thought this is a novel idea and one that people don't think about very often. Rather than, you've got your ideal clients that you want to get in front of and you want to be able to sell to them, invite them along to your networking group. Like, go in at a different angle. It's your networking community as much as the network. We talk about this. We're only as good as the members we have in our community. So if you're sat there thinking, oh, I really want to get in front of XYZ, invite them along to your group, whether that's only BNI, wherever it is you go, because not only is it going to benefit you, you get an opportunity to speak to that person on a different level and not just sell at them. You're opening up an opportunity for them to come and meet other business owners, and you're helping the people that you're building a community with. So I think there's a huge scope in most communities. There is a lack of awareness of, as a member, I can bring people into this sphere. And that's not intentional. It's not because people don't want to do it. I think A, because we don't ask very often, and B, it's because it doesn't occur to you that that's something you can do. So I think that's a really nice thought to leave on. If you're wanting to get more people, because let's face it, if you go and join another network, you're probably going to know 20% of them at least, because they all cross over. Bring people in, invite people along to your existing networks.
Good point. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Phil, for joining us today. Great question, Nicola. So thank you. You've given us loads to talk about. Not that we needed that much of a prompt, because it's
don't normally,
isn't it? But yeah. Phil, any final points before we wrap up?
The only thing I would say is feel the fear and go networking.
Yeah.
There you go.
Get a bash.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Phil. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for you guys for watching and listening. This has been Adventures in Networking, and we'll see you again next month.